And voila, we are now recording to the cloud. Good evening, my name is Joe Palumbo. This is our health and safety team at Pleasantville High School. This is the second time that we have met this summer as we plan and prepare for September 2020, the opening of schools. Certainly over the course of the last week, there has been a significant amount of information shared by the New York State Department of Health, the New York State Department of Education, the governor's office, and then many FAQ documents released by the New York State Department of Education based on their first document, which in many ways, was very broad. And I think that was probably intentional to provide districts, with some flexibility when necessary. Plans from the districts are due to the state at the end of the week next week. What Mary has shared with me, Superintendent Fox-Halter, is that she will have to sign off on a number of different attestations that we will be taking measures to make sure that both students and members of the faculty and staff are safe and that we've got safeguards, during the school day. We are currently looking at a few different models for instruction. I just finished a meeting with that committee. I'll give you a quick kind of Reader's Digest, on the models that we're looking at. And everyone on this team has access to that document. So if you go to the main document and you click the link for team 3, you can see the different models. The first model that I shared with the team this evening was a model for an A-B alternating schedule. Monday would be a fully synchronous day for all students that would take place remotely. When I say synchronous, I always confuse the two, it's synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is in real time, so it's not something that is recorded and you watch later. Students would follow their schedule throughout the day like they would if they were in the building on that A day at home on their devices. On the A days and the B days, we would break the students into 2 different cohorts. Today, I spent a lot of time. I printed out a 450-page document, which included rosters for every one of our classes. And I went back to my teacher grids, and I was putting a big number in the right-hand corner that represented how many total students were in the class, and then 2 numbers on the lower left and right-hand corners that represented what a split would look like if I took an A through M approach and an N through Z approach. It looks like we will be able to accommodate students if we were to adopt a 50% model. That's a good thing. I had 2 principals reach out to me in the Westchester area today who explained to me that they are most likely going to have to look at a 33% model. So instead of an A group and a B group, these principals talked about an A group, a B group, and a C group. And of course I asked, well, why would you do that? And he explained to me that his preference was to not do it, but that in his school, and he has over 1,500 students, he said, I just don't have the space to even break kids up, if I have 50%, and he can't get his head around lunch and some other activities during the day because, as you start to scale up and you multiply your student population by 2 and 3, we're at about 570, that work becomes so much more difficult. That being said, I also shared a model 2 with the group, which was a 33% model. That is not one that the group responded well to. They're much more in favor if we have to go hybrid in looking at the A and B. I thought it was important to put that out there just to give folks some idea of some of the things that are happening, and ideas that are in place in other districts. And obviously if our plan ended up getting pushed back by the State Department of Ed as a result of, population density in the building, then maybe the 33% is something we would have to look at, based on that state feedback. The third plan that I shared with the team today was a block plan. I can't take credit for it. I stole it from Katona Lewisboro. Andrew Selesnik happens to live here in town. He works as the superintendent there. And he's someone who I will often reach out to. He was the longtime principal at Horace Greeley High School. and he's got a lot of experience, with developing master schedules. They're looking at a model that is a little different than ours, but in some ways it is similar. In their model, they start out with Monday with that same synchronous learning schedule for all students, where teachers get to teach in a live way to every one of their students remotely. And then instead of having an A day and B day periods 1 through 9, they do 5 periods at a time. So on Monday, group A comes in for periods 1 through 5. And instead of being 40 minutes because they're blocks, those periods of instruction are 70 minutes. On the second day for A students, they come in for periods 6 through 9. And of course, that leaves 1 extra block. And what they're doing in that other district is they're using that extra block to do SEL work, to provide students with supports, perhaps do some remediation, some reteaching, all those types of things. The drawback in that model is that unlike the A and B model that I said we would be kind of exploring in option number 1, you only get to see each one of your teachers in person once a week. Now, it is for an extended period of time, but it's only 1 meeting. The feedback that I received from the group that I just met with is, many of them liked the idea of the longer meeting because it paved the way for more conversation and perhaps some in-depth work on topics that are introduced in class. But one of the things they also talked about is, wow, Joe, I wish I could have the longer time and have my child see their English, math, science, and social studies teacher twice a week. So what I plan on doing tomorrow as part of my weekly update is sharing those models, with families at large, asking for some feedback through a short form, and then using that information, along with, the other work that I've been doing to drive our thought process in regards to the plan that we present to the state, at the end of July, which is not this Friday, but the following Friday. Are there any general questions or ideas that anyone wants to share before we jump into some health and safety work, around schedule or instruction, or things that they've heard from neighboring districts?
Joe, it's me, Norma. Hi.
I know.
Just to be clear, so the Model 1, A and B would be 45 minutes?
Yeah, I haven't fine-tuned the timing yet. It would be anywhere between 40 and 45 minutes. And the reason I say that is one of the challenges that we have in the new environment, and Greg can speak a little bit more to it when we talk about health and safety, is the screening process for getting students in the building. So I'm trying to get my head around, how we can streamline that as best as possible so that we don't lose a lot of instructional time. One of the challenges that I'm sure that we're going to face is that when students enter the building in September 2020, it will be different for our sophomores, juniors, and seniors than any entrance they've ever been involved in during the previous years. So for example, if you were a student, last September, you would come in, you'd go down to the cafeteria, you'd get a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. You might stop by and see some of your friends in the library. Maybe then you'd swing by the gym, say hello to some more of your friends, and then you'd head to class. In this new environment, we're not going to be able to allow all of that unstructured congregation in the building. Really, when we get you checked in, we're going to have to ask you to report to your classroom, and have a seat at your assigned space. I think that's probably going to create a desire for some students to arrive at the last possible minute. But the problem with that is that then we'll have lines, even if we do multiple points of entry. So, one of the things that we've been discussing in each one of the teams that I've had meetings with is the need for orientation programs for students in grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, because although they'll be entering the same building, the policies, the programs, the structure is all going to look very different. We're also using some different tools for online learning, which I would love to give students some in-depth training on, in addition to families, parents, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, guardians, whomever our children may reside with. So that orientation piece is going to be so important. So to get back to your question, Norma, around the duration of the periods, it would be about 40 to 45 minutes. And I would certainly look to maximize every minute that we have in the teacher contract to connect, our students with those teachers during the school day. In the block meeting, Norma, it would be anywhere between 70 and 75 minutes. The big difference being they wouldn't be going through their entire schedule on their 2 visits during the building. So they would see the teacher, like let's say the English teacher, they would only see that person once a week. And that I got some pretty cool feedback, from the parents that I previously met with, about that model.
In the model 2, it would also be somewhere between 40 and 45 minutes, right?
For the 33%, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the only difference in the model 2 is the number of students in the building. And like I said today, I broke down the English department, the social studies department, the math department, the world language department, the one department, and the 2 departments I haven't really gotten to yet, and I'm gonna do that tomorrow morning first thing, is science and our fine and performing arts. But I have a suspicion, that I'm gonna be able to do the 50%, based on my initial work today. And then obviously we're gonna have to use space creatively in the building and outside of the building, by the way. I had a lovely family today contact me. They have a wedding tent that they said that we can use. So, we're going to find a way, whether it's outside or inside. I really took Harold's recommendations to heart, last week when he talked about maximizing outdoor space and getting kids in the fresh air. That's something that we're going to certainly look to do whenever the weather allows us to do it. Specifically, I'm thinking about band and chorus. They have to be much more spread out than the other courses that we offer. So having them outside, I think is going to be very helpful. And other courses. One of the teachers in my last committee is an English teacher. She said, Joe, I plan on bringing my students outside as long as the weather is nice enough for us to do it. So, we're going to work to make that happen throughout the year, whenever we can.
So, Joe, can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Hey, how's it going? So,
Very well,
what was good? So, it's a 50% student coming in each day is what we're looking at.
So that's the first of the 3 models that I shared.
Right.
The 50%, the second model was a 33%, and then the third model was also a 50%, but it was in a block schedule format. So theoretically, you could do the block schedule with 33% also. What I'll do for all parents is I'll make sure that in tomorrow's update that I send out, I kind of take that information right out of the shared document that we have and put it into a document that's easily accessible so that families can look at it.
So, along that lines, if you have 50% of the students coming in on any given day, you have to get them into the building in what, 2 points of entry, 3 points of entry?
So we've talked about 3 points of entry for the students and 1 point of entry for the staff. We're currently looking at a few different products for screening. Some of them include some work at home. Some of them include some work in person. We're going to have some more information, about that process and what it'll look like in the coming weeks.
All right. So that's about 160 kids every morning, more?
It's more, yeah. So it's more like 260.
At each entry point?
Oh, no. In the A and the B cohort. So between the 130, yeah. So you're looking at less than 100, for each entry.
Okay. So, and even if you had a first period class outside, you wouldn't have to worry about getting them into the building during that first entry. If you scheduled outdoor classes first period, say 50 kids, I don't know, that lessens your load of entry of getting into the building, and then they don't come into the second period at a designated point of entry, probably the main entrance. Maybe that helps you get these kids in and start the day.
That's a great idea.
More efficiently. It's kind of staggering your start times, or your points of entry.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
Joe, those kids that are coming into first period that are being put outside, which I think is a great idea, still have to be screened, correct?
They'll have to be screened upon entry to the building. I haven't thought about this concept of having them start classes, before they're screened. My initial thought based on the guidance, Josie, would be that they would have to be screened by someone before they were in close proximity, to other students or the teachers. But I would look at that. This is a new idea. I'm going to see if we can make it work.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so I will be sure to share that scheduling information with all families tomorrow, like I said, as part of my update, and seek some feedback as we round the bend in terms of the submission of our plan. What I've asked Mr. Fondi to do, Greg has been, working, with our building nurse and, with other assistant principals in the district, around health and safety. So he has some work that he'd like to share, and then he's going to open it up for some conversation.
One suggestion I would make in regards to the screening, right? I mean, I think some lines will be completely like impossible to avoid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's important then that the kids sort of line up outside, actually, not inside the building.
Yeah.
So if you have some smaller tents on a day when it rains, right? So maybe some covering in front of the entrance so that the kids can stand up outside, wait outside, even when it rains.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you, Harold.
One question, before they get screened, is it protocol that the students be 6 feet apart before they get screened?
Yeah, and that's a little bit of what Greg is going to talk about, of all the different ways that we're going to be, putting reminders and signage out there, because like I said earlier, this is such a dramatic shift for our students in terms of what they're accustomed to. That you can't come to school and hang around and, punch your buddies in the arm and be hanging all over each other. And, I understand that's an important part of adolescence and growing up is being around your friends, but I think if we do a good job at discussing the why with our students and, we teach and we put supports in place, I think our students will respond well. But Melissa, I think that's going to be an interesting adjustment. I know it is for me. Like when I see people in society now, I kind of want to like air high five, or, you see someone that you haven't seen for a while. You want to connect with them in the same human ways that you always have. And yet you've got these considerations to take into account.
And my concern, adolescents be it adolescence, is as much as we can do to demarc or note where they need to be and where they need to stand. Even us adults, you still group up. So as much as we can do to show them that.
I'm thinking for the outdoors, it would probably make sense for us to use cones for that. Just because the tape that we plan on using in the inside of the building, you can't use in the same way outside of the building. We could use chalk too, but that'll kind of go away over time. Whereas if we do some things with cones, I think that might be a good way to approach it. But that's something we're going to problem solve around. And it's definitely a good suggestion.
And I know it's hard, especially outside, but even just from ShopRite, we all know you don't look down when you walk, you look up. So having things at eye level and ahead of you versus down on the ground will help people see it.
Definitely.
Yeah, Joe, I would loop in maybe Steve from the farmer's market. He's really gotten expertise at this point in cones, and we've got these long plastic strips that attach the cones and signage at a certain level, and people are really, it gets obedience quickly. So.
Okay, John, do you want to talk about some of the work that you've been doing around signage, and then we'll have Mr. Fondi talk?
Sure, Joe. So I've been ordering signs for the district and collecting the amount that each school needs from the assistant principals. Greg and I walked around the high school 2 days in a row, identifying how many signs we need, where we need them. They're going to be branded. There'll be a paw, and it'll say Pleasantville Panthers on it. So they are a type of branding sign, and we have them for the floor 6 feet away. We have signs for each bathroom about the protocol for washing your hands, wear face masks, arrows for stairwells of what directions the traffic should flow. So we've done quite a bit, and also Don Marr reached out to me, and I'll share this with Greg and Joe now, which Harold brought up. As far as if there's poor weather during entry, the district is looking to purchase additional tents to be able to, basically social distance as we're screening kids coming into school. So we are talking about all the things that you guys are talking about. And I just got the BRS order, and I'll be arranging a PO for all the, signage that we need. It's not necessarily a sticker. It's kind of like a vinyl thing that like we'll stick on multiple places. Joe, I do have cones that I have ordered extra for athletics. So we could certainly use cones to keep the spacing apart in the front of the building.
Thanks, John.
And John, this is going to sound like a very weird question, but I deal with live events. The vinyl for the floor, they make matte ones and textured. If you can get the ones with textured, if they get wet, people don't slip on them as much.
These, I was told that these are non-slip.
Perfect.
Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about the health and safety work and some of the core functions that we've discussed this week?
Sure, we made some progress this week. I've been first in contact with our school nurse, Miss Carey, throughout the summer. We were going to be meeting throughout the summer to finalize these plans. Just to know, everything that this committee decides upon and everything that we do will be communicated to the community, obviously through Mr. Palumbo's communication. It will be posted to the website. Other things that we're going to be doing is Joe mentioned, like orientation. We'll have some kind of how-tos for safety and protocols and distancing through videos, through the homerooms in the beginning of the year. I can imagine the first couple of days we'll review those procedures quite frequently to remind the kids about the expectations. In addition, Joe mentioned orientation programs from upperclassmen. I spoke to our guidance department today. We will have a Zoom orientation for incoming 9th graders, most likely the week before school starts, to talk about safety and health, but also about acclimating to the new building. These will be run by the 9th grade students' guidance counselors, answering questions they might have about school. In addition, I will be offering small group tours for 9th graders the week before school. I'll work on the logistics about that, and we'll let you know how that's going to work out in terms of signing up for that, times, etc. Joe mentioned the screening, but we're looking at several points of entry throughout the morning. Looking at a time about 7:30 to 8:15 in those spaces with another location for faculty. One of my challenges actually is not 8:30 to not, I'm sorry, it's not 7:30 to 8:15. It's for students that arrive throughout the day. And so what we'll do there is we will have only one entrance available for students, which is similar to past years. We'll have it as the main entrance, and we'll have someone there providing a temperature check and screenings if necessary. In addition, we will have screenings and temperature checks for any visitors as well through the main office throughout the year. So that's the temperature check. Mr. Barreline talked about the signage in the building. Another thing that Mrs. Fox-Salter and Mr. Whipple mentioned is that we are purchasing water stations throughout the building. These are hand washing water stations that do not need to be hooked up to a water source. They just need power. So think of a vanity that you might have in your bathroom. There'll be stations around the entrance points of the school. People can wash their hands. Obviously, it's on a tank system that our custodians will replace on a regular basis. So that's something in addition. We'll also have hand sanitizers throughout the building in all key spots for kids and students and faculty members to use. I've also been working with the nurse in terms of protocols as directed by New York State in terms of a student who arrives to school and has a temperature. What's the protocol? In terms of contacting parents, about having that student go home immediately. Also faculty going home immediately. If it happens during the day, we've designated an area where students can go and rest until their parent picks them up and they are separated from the rest of the student body. And then the nurse would work with the family based on their symptoms and temperature, what's the best course of action in meeting with their doctor and when it's safe for them to return. I also, in terms of safety and wellness, I've had direction from the state and I've worked with the other assistant principals on fire drills and lockdowns. We are mandated to have fire drills throughout the year. We will have fire drills. And obviously in an emergency situation, the #1 priority is to get out of the building safely and then worry about social distancing. So we will have fire drills. obviously we have a smaller population of students in the building. The lockdown, however, is much different. My lockdown drills will be announced to the students, and rather than gathering the kids and congregating in the corner of a classroom as if it was a real lockdown drill, the students will stay in their chairs and socially distance, and the teachers will explain what to do in a real emergency. And then we'll make that known also to the students. It will not be a surprise to them. They will know about it. All 3 buildings will have practice drills, and it will never be a gotcha moment for kids because they have enough anxiety already. We don't need to add anything else. Joe asked me to talk about health and safety in terms of lunch. Due to social distancing, we can only have so many kids in the cafeteria. If we have a half the building in, let's suppose we have 100 kids for one of the 3 lunch periods, we haven't done the exact numbers, but we're estimating between about 40 kids in the cafeteria. We'll also have extra temporary tables outside for students, the folding tables, about 12 to 15, in addition to the green tables that you might see on the patio. Also, the gymnasium will be used as an alternative location for lunch. Remember, since we only have at least half the classroom desks in the classrooms, we have to find a place to put these desks. So we're going to be finding creative places. 1, the gymnasium. 2, other places throughout the building that we will transform into either lunchrooms and or study hall locations and or potential classrooms that are much larger than the regular classrooms. So again, for lunch, we're going to be okay. We'll have multiple spaces for kids to have lunch. Obviously, they're going to congregate first if they have to in the cafeteria to pick up lunch in a line that will be socially distanced. And the coffee bar will be opened only for grab and go. So they won't be able to sit there and relax with their friends at tables. I mentioned the orientation program, which I think is valuable for our 9th graders, especially this year, to have these Zoom meetings. And I think the tour is very important as well. I'll be offering tours, myself and whoever wants to help me. And one other thing, lockers will not be assigned to students. What I will do is I will lock all the lockers. I will put locks on them so they won't be able to get in them. We'll use zip ties and locks because I have a lot of extra. And at this point, no one will have lockers, so the hallways will be free. And we'll work with teachers. I'm going to work with teachers on textbooks and how we're going to distribute those and how we're going to work that out. That's pretty much my talk. Does anyone else have any questions for me?
So just a quick thing about computers. In terms of our rotation for providing students with laptops, we were scheduled to provide them to the freshman class this year. So that would have meant that the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors would have had devices. We've decided as a district to provide the seniors with laptops also. So that means any technology that students are using in the building, by and large, will be used, by that individual student. There are a small number of exceptions to that, and we're looking into solutions. The exceptions are the classes where students use very specific computer programs that aren't, that we can't use on our laptop computers. So, that's something that we're working on right now to make sure that those high touch areas, and those high touch devices, are not something that multiple students are using. In fact, Greg was just working with the senior class today. We normally take those portraits during the summer months. And what we learned this summer is that typically students use the same cap and gown and they just switch when they come in for the portraits. We can't do that this year. We probably shouldn't have done it any year. So, we're working now to develop a different plan for that. And it's going to be a lot of that learning, throughout the year. And I think it's important that we keep this conversation going. It's critical that we work with students to get buy-in. The adults, in many times are outnumbered, by the students in the building. So if we don't have their buy-in, it's very difficult to do any of these things that we're talking about well. But like I've said a couple times in this conversation tonight, our students respond, when we ask them to do things. So I believe that we are going to have a great plan in place. I think our students will do a wonderful job with it. and we'll keep everybody healthy so that we can scale up the work that we're doing with students as quickly as possible.
Can I make a suggestion about lunch real quick?
Yeah, definitely.
I think if we're gonna really try to like kind of keep the space and stuff, the concept of doing like an online order early in the day that you can grab and go really becomes huge, especially for that sandwich station. I know they did a little pilot with that last year, but I think that's gonna have to maybe be the norm and not the exception this year.
Eileen, that's a great point. Thank you. We're going to definitely put that into the plan. Thank you very much for reminding us on that.
I was going to ask Mr. Fondi, you might have addressed it. I didn't go to the last meeting. What's the screening involved? Because this population tends to not present as much with the temperature. So I'm just concerned about that piece and if that's going to hold up. You know, if you have to get into the whole,
Sure.
Do you have a sore throat? Do you have a headache? Are you having any issues with your taste or your smell? Because the temperature thing can work great, but it's also not a great indication for this population. And so you may have addressed it. And then I'm also hoping to hear a little bit more about utilizing outdoor space, if that could be used as much as possible. But I guess that's my biggest concern is the screening. And then to that extent, do you have any, and I didn't read the whole document from the New York State or anything like that, and maybe this is in there. Is there any kind of agreement or reciprocity that our school or the district or something in the county of Westchester might have with a testing site? So if because we obviously know it's really difficult to get tested, and I know right now there's it's just difficult. There's like a lag, it's taking a long time. There's a lot of confusion about where to go, the rapid test, the non-rapid test, which ambulatory centers around here. So if there is any indication that somebody may have an issue, do you have like that in place? Like, this is where you recommend you go. This is what the rapid test is. This is, all that information. Kind of like when I was on the lice committee and we knew exactly where the lice lady was.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like now for the COVID, we really need to know, especially since, the number one thing, in my opinion, is just getting them tested. Just get tested as much as possible.
Great questions. I'll start with the first one about the screenings. At this point, the state is asking us to do a temperature check for all students every day. And they said periodically questionnaires about access to COVID-19 family members or traveling out of state. I need to work with our nurse and other assistant principals to have a cohesive plan. I will work on that and get back to you on that. I don't have all the answers for that in terms of how we're going to ask, what specific questions, if any, we're going to ask students as they walk in. In terms of the temperature, we're still working on getting the best device where the screener would put something either near their forehead and have them come in. And then after that, we would have a second person recording information on that student if they passed or if they cleared or they did not clear. We're not recording any information about temperatures because that's not really permissible for staff or students. So that's the first question in terms of questioning. I need to get back to you. In terms of testing sites, I'm going to consult with Mrs. Bramswig, our head of nurses, to have more information. Quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that now, but I will find out in our process going forward what's going to happen and what kind of recommendations the school could put forth to families in that situation. But those are great questions.
Yeah, my thought with the testing centers is that that's going to be a real challenge for, Westchester County.
Huge. Yeah, it's just so.
Given the fact that all of the schools are going to be opening in some way, I just don't see how testing centers would be able to develop, close relationships with each school. But Barbara, that's something that we really need to think about. So we're going to look into that, and see if there, is some provisions for that. I'm very interested to talk to, Dr. Roy. I'm sure she'll have some ideas around it. And that's something that we need to think about. So
yeah, even if you guys, I don't know how it would work, but even if you guys could get the swabs, like, and the nurse could do it there. It's not difficult, but then there's like a direct relationship with the lab or getting it over to the lab. I don't know, but
yeah, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
And I think the question about the screening is real interesting too. We're we're gonna, go with the best advice from the medical folks that we work with. So I'm really curious to hear what Dr. Roy says, Mary Bramswig. That is something that hasn't been uniformly released by the state, but we'll certainly, it's not going to be myself or Greg that develops that comprehensive, questionnaire. We're going to, work with the, doctors and nurses who have been at this full time, for the last,
Yeah. I mean, I worked the COVID unit for 2 months before I went out on disability, and I'm going back in September.
Wow.
So I'll, I'm definitely will be right there when it's not as busy, thank God, but my unit is the COVID unit, and I'm going back in September. So maybe, and every day this all changes, but even in the adults, there were plenty of people who did not have temperatures. So.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that? Right. I mean, it's a state requirement, these temperature checks and symptom checks. Right. So I think we'll have to do it. But I mean, everybody should be aware of that. It's really not a very effective way to do this.
Right.
About probably 40% of infections, even in adults, occur in the pre-symptomatic phase. Right. So, and in kids, I mean, a lot of kids have no symptoms whatsoever.
Right.
Ideally, what we would do is, and we know from I just participated in the Cornell introduction there yesterday, they test all their students at entry point. That would be something that we should do ideally, but obviously this is very difficult and it's going to be not up to the school level. That's something that should be done at the state level, and I think that's a little bit probably out of our jurisdiction. In my opinion, ideally, if we really want to keep the schools open, everybody needs to be tested at entrance and then probably at regular intervals. That is nothing we can do at the school level. That's something that has to be initiated at the state level, right?
Right.
I would like to make some other comments that is more practical, and what we haven't talked about much is mask wearing. And then I just want to make a general comment, which is, I think, really critical to understand. Nationwide and everywhere, we're focusing on distancing, which is great, right? 6 feet is good against droplet transmission, and that works outside perfectly well. In the indoor environment, right? And this is really important to understand. In the indoor environment, if there is poor air circulation, right? Distancing by itself is not a guarantee. It doesn't work. You can, in the indoor environment with poor air circulation, you can get infected at a much larger distance because these small droplets stay in the air and travel much further than 6 feet. Right? So my concern is the mask wearing policy. I know that it is difficult to wear masks, right? But I think in the indoor environment, we really have to focus on that. And my concern relates to, I mean, when I saw the state guidance, it's a little vague when we can take off the masks. I think whenever masks are taken off, first of all, it's hard to get kids to always do this, right? Not just kids, adults take it off all the time and slip it on that chin, right? And this is going to be a really big effort to enforce that. But then more complicated situations when you have to take off the mask, for example, lunch, right? So, I mean, Greg, your plan was really great, I think, right? And I really got to comment, both of you, Joe and Greg, on really great work, right? But my concern is during lunchtime and other times when masks are being taken off, right? You really have to provide very strong air circulation, or better, do it outdoors. So my preference would be lunch outdoors. Everybody grabs a sandwich and goes outdoors. That would be my preference. If we cannot do this, and I think with some rain cover and some warm sweaters and jackets, we can do this in January, right? I mean, my kids make fun of me all the time for being a little tough in this kind of respect. And but I think it's really important to understand this, right? The indoor environment, 6 feet by itself, if you take your mask off, does not guarantee prevention of infection.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I know that you passed along the pictures in the article from the New York Times last week.
I saw that, yeah.
Classroom, and how 100 years ago they were educated all winter long. I think to eat outside is a great idea. I always ask the kids to go out and enjoy themselves, especially in the beginning of the year, because I tell them we're going to have 6 months inside of cold weather. So you go outside and enjoy. There was something I didn't mention that I should have, is that the district's stance is that although not required by the state if social distancing, we are asking students and staff to wear masks at all times in the building, except for those times where they can't, when they're eating, etc. So that's something that I know Mary Fox-Alter has spoken to Joe and myself about that, and the other buildings. I agree. Anytime we can get outside, we'll bring them outside for lunch and promote that.
The one thing also,
bringing games outside, and we have a bunch of ping pong tables. See if I can bring them out on the patio. Board games from the library, and just get kids outside. To me, it's good decisions. If it wasn't even in a health epidemic, it'd be great to be outside anyway. So I think those are good points. Thank you.
I just want to one last time, the mask wearing, there is good medical data on this, right? Mask wearing, if everybody wears a mask all the time, even a surgical mask, right? Not necessarily N95. If everybody wears it all the time, it is unbelievably effective, right? I mean, even in the medical environment where there was a recent study published where healthcare workers, right, were looked at how does this affect if everybody always wears a mask. It was incredible effective in the indoor environment. So this is, I think, one of the things that really has to be emphasized.
Agreed.
So it sounds to me, Joe, like, how many tents are we looking at? We're looking at one donated tent for outside and maybe several for entryway in case it rains.
No, we're
it sounds to me like we're not embracing outdoor classrooms, outdoor activities, mandatory type stuff to keep this outside as much as possible and spread people out to the best that we can. There's a lot of space there. That whole softball field back there, the front lawn in front of the school. I just came to mind, is there going to be a secondary nurses station outside? Some kind of trail? Somebody gets sick, all this testing, everything goes on. Where are they going to be? I would think we'd have to have a tent or a possible nurse's trailer for somebody to go in the interim before they get picked up. Something like that. I don't know. When I hear just tents on the outside for people to come in case it's raining or drizzling, and then one donated party tent, I get the vibe that we're not embracing fully scheduled classes outside. Protection from the sun, shade, possible inclement weather. Like, you could be outside straight until the end of December under a tent, no doubt. Wired up, temporary heat, ceiling fans, the whole thing. It's a doable thing. There's a cost to it. I understand that. But I feel like you can get a lot more activities and a lot more classes outside. And I think the kids would appreciate it too.
Yeah.
To be able to cut loose. And the other thing that caught my attention was the fire drills. I'm going to assume every fire drill is going to be done at the end of the day so nobody has to come back into the building. Otherwise, you'd have to rescreen them. If you did a fire drill in the middle of the day and now everyone has to re-enter the building, would you have to rescreen every student?
My initial thought is no, but that's something I'll look into.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll look into it.
Just a thought. All right.
Yeah.
I have one question.
And Rich, I am going to look into scaling up with tents to see, what our access is, what type of regulation state has around those, when they're used and those types of things. So that's something I'll definitely look into.
The fire department's going to have a lot to say about that, whether they're fire retardant, fire resistant, if they impede any kind of egress getting out of the building. So you might want to consult with them on placement and any kind of obstructions that they might create.
Yeah, I'm going to take a close look at that. Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
One question, I don't know if this can be answered here or not. The state keeps putting out additional guidelines. You have to self-quarantine if you've traveled here, if you've self-quarantined, if you travel there. How does this work as, we start school September. How do we know if everyone who's entering school has been to a state that has or not? How do we ensure that we're protecting everybody?
So we're going to be asked to have students and staff complete questionnaires. And, unfortunately, I don't have private investigators, so, I rely on the good nature, of our neighbors to be honest with us, about, where they've been and what their level of risk is, might be for others in the community. So that will be part of the questionnaire, that we ask the staff and students to complete. I believe it's the staff is daily, and I believe the students, the way the language reads, is periodically. So we've got to determine how often we're going to ask students to do that. But those are certainly going to be some of the detailed questions that we ask, when students enter the building. And then throughout the year, if they travel, if they happen to leave the state, all those types of things.
Thank you.
And if the staff gets sick or has to quarantine for 14 days, and if they're sick, they're not going to really have the ability to teach from home. They're ill. Is there a plan to replace staff members as needed?
We're currently trying to seek out some partnerships with local colleges and universities. On a good year, substitute teachers are very difficult for us to come by, given the rate, our compensation, and some other factors. So that's something we're going to be looking at pretty closely. We are also, have been working with the staff around, potential buddy coverages. That would be where, in our building, many of our teachers have colleagues who teach a similar course. So how we could kind of leverage those folks in those situations is something we're going to look at.
What is the criteria to be a substitute teacher? Could you put a questionnaire out to the community if people have that ability to pitch in? Maybe
you want to talk a little bit about the process?
Sure. The process for substitute is obviously you need a high school diploma, you need a certain amount of college credentials. At that point, if you are interested in a substitute on a normal year, you would meet with myself and or the curriculum coordinator or another person and be interviewed. And then you would be approved by the Board of Ed after you're fingerprinted and cleared, et cetera. So that would have to be done in, a couple of weeks or in September. But again, right now, we still don't have any indication from staff members in terms of their full commitment at this point. I take that back, not a full commitment. Teachers are ready to come back to school, but in case we don't know about a teacher who might be something, we can act accordingly, as Joe mentioned before. But yeah, the process is you would need to be fingerprinted, you need to have somewhat of a college experience, and you need to be interviewed. That's it.
And if anybody out there wants to do it, we are always accepting applications. I'll just put it out there. Feel free to apply. We could use you.
Excellent.
Joe,
Thank you.
if we consider outside spaces, one of the things as you start, like, again, maybe the logistics of placing them, I don't know how much emphasis is going to be on using devices in school since they're going to be using their devices so often out of school. I mean, we always joke around how I color code my paper and everything. But the other concern would be, especially to, I guess, later in the day, charging stations for devices. So as we push for the outdoor spaces, and I understand the need and the value of them, that might create a bit of a logistical issue if devices are going to be, especially if you're doing like 60-minute periods. I would think a device is going to have to be part of that just for ebb and flow of the time. But just it's something to just think of and kind of put in that positioning conversation.
Okay.
And I guess along those same lines, Wi-Fi or internet for the computers that are outside as well.
Right, depending upon where you are. Yeah, because there are probably some areas I'll have to walk around with my phone tomorrow and see where I go with the, the bars versus the LTE. That'll be interesting. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll walk around. And we can always look at some alternatives there. So, but I'm going to walk the campus tomorrow, specifically those outdoor areas, to see what the connectivity looks like.
And is there any thought of leveraging some of the parking lots for tents as well?
All outdoor spaces are really kind of in play. We do not have a tremendous amount of extra parking on campus. In fact, I never use the spot that's assigned to me because we just don't have spots. I let other folks from the staff use it. But certainly when I think about our campus, I'm thinking about that backfield where the softball area is. I'm thinking about, the turf field. I'm thinking about the circle, some areas behind the building. any area that we can leverage, we'll certainly, look to use to the extent possible.
Thank you.
Joe, I don't know if you talked about this last week, but in terms of the air circulation within the school, have you already looked into that? And if you have, what's the status?
Yeah, so New York State has pretty stringent requirements around air circulation. So Eileen, who's in the meeting now, she works in the social studies department, and those rooms are hot up there. And we would love to have air conditioning. And a lot of times people will say, well, the air is just hot up there, it doesn't move. That air does move, and we do meet state regulations around, air exchange in all of our rooms in the building. The big challenge in a place where, like Ms. Sheldon teaches, is it gets real hot during September and during May and June. So sometimes we scale the exchange back because it's bringing in hot air from the outside. The silver lining is that those rooms also have very big windows. So in our last conversation, one of the things that, Harold was talking about, was the use of large fans and open windows kind of to push air out. So that's something that we're going to look at. But in terms of the air exchange, we do have those systems in place. I can't necessarily speak to particular filters. I know that's been a large conversation out there. Are there filters that work, specifically, for the COVID-19 virus? That I do not have information about.
You have actual information how many air exchanges per hour you have, because they are like, if you look at aerosol infections, there are actually recommendations on how many air exchanges you need per hour.
I do not, but I will get it tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be
that I can get. And when I spoke with the superintendent about this and the director of facilities earlier today, she said that one of the things that New York has going for it is that the New York requirements around air exchange are higher than many of our neighboring states. So I'm going to assume, it's a good amount per hour, but I'm going to get that specific number tomorrow morning.
An air exchange, does it mean the air gets circulated, or is it actually fresh air intake? That makes a big difference. Obviously, if you don't have filters, air exchange by like having the air go in circles doesn't mean anything.
I believe it's fresh air intake, but I'm going to double check that.
Joe, is this your subtle way of telling me when this is all done, I might be getting air conditioning?
No. In fact, what we've talked about is, retrofitting the building for air conditioners, because it's a 1927 building. It's beautiful. It's just cost prohibitive. But perhaps in the future, one of the things that we could do is put cooling coils on the air exchange units, and that might, solve some of the issues we have with the temperature in our warmer spaces. We look at that at the gymnasium, and some other areas. So it's not impossible, Eileen, but certainly in the COVID era, it's unlikely, that we're going to prioritize air conditioners. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I meant like, the next 20 years that I have.
Oh, maybe. You never know. Never know. So I have some work to do. I have some follow-up questions that I'm going to be speaking with the superintendent and our director of facilities about tomorrow. I'm very interested in finding out that air exchange per hour. Rich, to your point, I want to make sure that I look at those outdoor spaces and, be aggressive around getting the type of equipment that will allow us to utilize them. Barbara, great questions about, the screening process and some of the work that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to follow up on that. And I want to thank everybody for being involved in the conversation tonight. Tomorrow, I will be sending out, as part of my weekly update, that form for the different models. If you could please, give some feedback, for the models that we have now, that would be great. If you can tap 2 of your neighbors on the shoulder and ask them to do the same, that would be even better, so that we can get a lot of feedback. And, we'll work on this. We'll continue to work on it together. Like I've said a number of times throughout this whole process, we are much more accustomed to having plans 6 months out and have a calendar and to know what everything's going to look like. But that's just not the world that we're all navigating right now. And it's important that these lines of communication remain open. The ideas and the questions tonight were great in terms of continuously spurring our thinking. And I'm looking forward to an excellent opening of the school year. My hope is that we open the year that we have great results, that our students and staff are all healthy, and that we can ramp up our efforts and get more people in on an even more frequent basis as quickly as possible. So I believe if we work together, we can accomplish that. And it gives me a lot of hope, for the upcoming school year. So I want to say thank you so much, for everything this evening. And I will see you soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Good
take
night.
care. Bye now.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Peace.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.